Hi, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining. So we will just wait like a minute or two maximum, just so everyone can join. So please keep that in mind and bear with me with that. I'm not sure where are you all coming from, but by the name, I can see you're pretty diverse, so that's really good. Okay, so I see some people answered where they're coming from. Okay, thank you for that. So I will I will share my presentation now, and everyone who joins will be able to watch it. So just a second. Okay, I hope you can see it and you can hear me well. So yeah, my name is Aydin Arnautovic, and I'm executive director of Viva Bich. And my presentation is going to be about the impact of the food on our planet. So Viva Bich shortly is the animal rights and vegan organization of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we are the first animal rights organization in Bosnia that fights for our planet and all its inhabitants. So without further ado, let's just talk about impact of the food. And the impact of the food, believe it or not, is one of the highest and one of the greatest environmental impact we humans produce on our planet. So what is environmental impact? An environmental impact is the effect that certain human activities have on a natural environment. So we know that humans impact the physical environment in many ways, like overpopulation, pollution, burning fossil fuels, resource depletion, deforestation, etc. And changes like these have triggered climate change and soil erosion, poor air quality, and undrinkable water. So we know there is quite a lot of things, and climate change is just one of them. So when we talk about environmental impact, we do not have to only talk about climate change, but as well as many other stuff, as you can see. Uh, so what has the worst impact on our planet? We usually love to ask ourselves and others as well, what has the biggest environmental impact? Is it a fossil fuels? Is it this or that? But in order to understand this, we have to go way back past. When we talk about the worst environmental impactors, we often focus on only one or two factors, such as air pollution, climate change, maybe soil degradation, but in fact, there are many factors that eventually accounts to this total ecological footprint. And ecological footprint is something that we love, that the word we use when we want to explain how much of the environmental impact something has on our planet, right? So factors that accounts into the ecological footprint are as the following, but of course not limited to, is water pollution, air pollution, water usage, land usage, deforestation, soil degradation, biodiversity loss, greenhouse gases emission, such as carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, sorry, and energy use. So you can see there's quite a lot of factors, right? And I have to say, even though like pretty much all of us are agree and are aware at least that we are in an environmental crisis, and global warming has reached a crisis point, prompting the view among experts that we are reaching the end game. And I think it's pretty familiar when we take a look. Um, all the data we have, like pretty much all the data agree that we are really in a crisis. And if you take a look at the NASA statistics, we can see, and even in the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC report published a report warning that we have only about a decade to limit the global warming to this famous 1.5 degrees Celsius. But beyond this, we really risk about our planet being like kind of gone. But even though, yeah, we will be gone on the planet. So I would just like to say that when we take a look at the peak of over 2,000 major disasters, they just happened pretty recently when we take a look at the data, right? And Uh, sorry. So I often asked myself and even like this was really a big question for me. Isn't overpopulation such a big issue, or is there something else that might play a game? And you can see as well that overpopulation plays pretty much a big role, right? If you take a look at here, you can see there were only 1 billion people, and a century later on, there's 1.5 billion people, and then here in like 2012 you have like 7 billion people. And despite the number of people is increasing very fast, trust me, the more problematic issues is not really the people eating and the number of people, but animals population and the way we produce them. And now, if you take a look at this, human consumes about, which is really huge, 5.2 billion of gallons of water and 21 billion pounds of food every year, while only cows, so now I'm talking here about only cows, not all the other animals, we consume about 45 billion gallons of water and 135 billion pounds of water. So this is really huge when we compare. So there's so much resources, mostly food that we produce for them. And as I'll explain it later on, you will see that according to the UN as well, that we produce five more times food for animals than for us, which is really uh, problematic, right? And human biomass today is more than a double the biomass of old wild megafauna from 10,000 years ago. Biomass is basically the how much we occupy our planet. And as in here statistics, you can see in prehistory, people were like really small amounts of species, right? Like that. But here, the global mass of only farm animals is now 22 times the weight of all wild animals. So we pretty much like have all the farmed animals here in the planet that we produce for ourselves, and wild animals are pretty going to extinct. And as well, it's clearly because of the animal agriculture, as I'll explain later on. Yeah, here as you can see as well, the terrestrial vertebrate weight in the gigatons of carbon, how much the carbon is produced by the animals eaten by humans today. This is really huge. And here I would just like to say that the number of non-human megafauna species that went extinct through time plotted against estimated populations growth of the humans, you can see that we are pretty much occupying the land and destroying the wild animals and their habitats only because of the livestock and animal agriculture mostly. And as I said here, it's a report from the UN IPCC recent report that humans extract 5 times more food from earth from farmed animals than from themselves. I can also send you all this data later on, just reach out to me. And in this presentation, I'll explain that animal agriculture is the leading cause. Now I say leading cause of global warming, water depletion, deforestation, species extinction, world hunger, zoonoses, and antibiotic resistance, and probably many other stuffs. But it's pretty much when you talk about animal agriculture or like pretty much any like any environmental issues, you can't really talk about it without saying that animal agriculture plays a role in it. And this was something that I didn't know before I went into all of this. Um, so since 1970, we have whipped out over 60% of the animal populations on the planet. And livestock farming is the leading cause of ocean dead zones, according to the EPA USA, Environmental Protection Agency of USA. And I would just like to say that you will see here as well that the single greatest cause of deforestation is in animal agriculture. And this is according to the NASA. And you can see the data, like the number really goes back then. And now imagine what data is now, like when the animal culture increased so much. And here we can see that livestock farming is the leading cause of biodiversity loss, according to the Science of the Environment. And you can see as well that later on, I will explain how this animal agriculture plays a role in the resource depletion. So we all seem to have difficult understanding how our choices, particularly regarding items we consume, such as food, could possibly have an impact on something or someone else in the world, especially when we are not really, like when we don't see it, when we don't hear it, it's sometimes hard to understand, because global hunger, particularly being the really problematic issue today, and the food insecurity are frequently oversimplified as being primarily only as a problem of scarcity, so not enough food there, or only a problem of distribution, so not access to food. But it's really complex, and we have to include both food supply and distribution issues. But here I'll talk about something that is related to animal agriculture, and which was pretty shocking for me to came to the conclusion that we actually have so much food, and we can actually feed, today we produce so much food that we can feed 10 billion people. Yet we give this food mostly to animals and not to humans. And more than, like, almost 1 billion people around the world are counted as suffering from chronic hunger. And this is pretty like conservative estimate based on a strict criteria. And here you can see that 1/3 of the world world grains, like soya or any other grains that are globally produced. So this is the average estimate, goes to the feeding animals, because animals, of course, like they require a lot of food, and that amount only this amount is enough to feed around 3 billion people. So only with the grains, when we talk about the grains, we could literally solve the hunger, the global poverty and hunger issues, and we would still have so much extra, right? And while animals, the animal products are pretty water intensive and resource intensive, we know that so many people don't have access to any food. So although having many layers of complexity, to most observers, the reason we have world hunger is because of poverty. While on its simplest level, this is true, animal-based food production systems are directly responsible for many factors affecting hunger, starvation, and even poverty, which then cycles itself back to hunger. So yeah, globally, even with the climate change issues and water extremes, we are producing enough grain to feed 2 times as many people as there are in the world. And for example, it depends on the nations as well, but we know that some nations eat a lot and like have using a lot of resources, and including the food waste. And we know that if, for example, if everyone ate like an average American, we would need 5 planets like those one we have today to feed ourselves. And realize that this is kind of sad, but realize that 82% of the world's starving children live in the very same countries where food is fed to animals that are then killed and eaten by more well-off individuals in developed countries like the US, UK, Europe, and pretty much any country where meat, dairy, and eggs are served, because most of those animal products are actually coming from those wealthy countries. So there's a lot to talk about this, but I would like to say that around when we all, so I came across this argument that but vegans are using a lot of soya, and there is a lot of soya that is consumed. Yeah, right, a lot of soy is produced, but only around 6% is used for humans, and like vast majority, and this data goes even down to 75% of the soya is actually livestock feed. So we can see that yeah, because the animals eat larger quantities of grains, and water usage is one of the issues that is also very problematic. So again, direct and indirect water usage, but I would just like to say that by 2030, half of the world's population will be living in areas of high water stress. And UN is actually, this is pretty, yeah, this is pretty recent, I would say, but again, UN was also warning us about this pretty much all the time. And the animal agriculture sector is already the largest user of water resources, accounting for roughly 70% of all freshwater withdrawals globally, and over 19% in most of the world's least developed countries. So we can see, I have decided to put the UN World Water Development Report, but there is so many studies that talks about this, and I think it's pretty obvious. We all know that animal agriculture requires a lot of water. If you take a look and think about how cows only requires to drink so much water, as I explained previously, it's pretty self-explanatory. Here we can see that animal raised for food create tremendous amount of excrement per second, and a lot of food waste and a lot of actually toxical waste and pollution that actually goes into our waters, including oceans. And so you'd say more water by not eating 1 pound of meat than you would by not taking a shower for 6 months. And we know, for example, for only 1 kilo of meat, it requires like 50,000 liters of water, while for vegan burgers, it's like 16 or 17 times less. So quite a lot of water. As you can see this data, how much water requirements per diet. And again, if you take a look at the domestic use, we this was actually really funny when I was searching about this, but at the very same time, kind of scary because we often talk about how we should turn off the water, choose water efficient water wipes and stuff like only take a shower. But when we think about it, domestic use is really small amount of water use, while animal agriculture requires like more than 50% of our usage. And I would just like to point out, this is from the study of University of Oxford from Joseph Poor and Nemec. And by the way, this study is actually the largest study, meta-analysis of the study that explains our environmental impact of food and diet. So you can see environmental footprints of dairy and plant-based milks. Here, it's pretty self-explanatory that the dairy milk in almost all those factors has the highest impact on the environment. And in this more simplified calculation, you can see that, for example, oat milk is pretty like and eco-friendly, but the dairy milk in any case is really problematic. And when you take a look at the almond milk, for example, almond milk requires quite a lot of water, but still not more than a dairy milk. So when we talk about almonds being water intensive, it's really nothing compared to the dairy. So what about a fish? When we talk about water and the life below water, we always comes across the eating fish, but eating fish is a bigger problem than you thought. Although many people believe that switching from eating cows or pigs to eating fish, they do planet a favor, but the truth is very far from this. Only like 1/3 of all fish tested contain microplastics, and we know this because most of the plastics that comes into the oceans are, believe it or not, from the fishing nests. So basically from industry that exploit fishes. And it's not really the plastic straws that are problematic, but I'll explain it a little bit later. And we see 90%, this is really horrible, 90% reduction in large fish since the 1950s. So this is from the Journal of Nature, one of the most prestige journal of scientific journals. And 70 fish we eat today comes from artificial fish farms. 80% of all plastics in the Pacific is coming from discarded fishing gear. All of you who are actually interested about this, there is one good organization that's called Ocean Cleanup. They do cleanup of oceans, and they actually came also across this pretty recently, which is like quite disturbing, right? And only 0.03 of all commercial plastics are plastic straws, while almost 50% is from fishing gear. Now, this is globally, but if you take a look at the Pacific, it goes to the 80%. And now 1/3 of all edible fishes caught in oceans are now fed at the livestock and farmed fish. So you can see how inefficient this food system is. And we know that also like vast majority of other fishes are caught indirectly when we have those large nests. When we take like millions of tons of those fishes, we also have this, like, it's called bycatch in industry, when we catch like sharks or other fishes that are not directly in our interest of consuming, unfortunately. And annually, 70 billion gallons of water is used on fracking. And so this is really problematic, right? I think this is also a really big number. But when we take a look and that a number that's 70 trillion of gallons per water per year is used only by animal agriculture, we see that this is really a bigger issue. And this is according to the EPA from almost like 10 years ago. And now we all know that this increases, right? So Now let's talk about global greenhouse gases emissions. So we managed to tackle basically the resources, the poverty, the water issue, and now about the greenhouse gases emissions. So there are three primary gases that are responsible generally for global warming. It's carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Um, Now, methane is more problematic because it has bigger power to kind of keep the heat within the planet. So it's more problematic than carbon dioxide. But we mostly love to talk about carbon dioxide. And now, when we talk about overpopulation, there is actually quite almost like really good correlation between number of people and CO2 carbon dioxide. But it doesn't mean that people are producing it itself. It means that they're supporting industry that produces them. And you will see that, for example, if one person exchanges a regular car for a hybrid, they'll reduce carbon dioxide emission by 1 ton per year, which is not bad, right? But if one person exchanges eating meat only, so eating meat for a vegan diet, they'll reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 1.5 tons per year, so more, right? And if every American dropped one serving of chicken per week, so this is not a lot from diet, it would save the same amount of CEO emissions as taking 500,000 cars off the road. Now, chicken, imagine what would be with a more eco-intensive needs. Methane, as I said, is 20 times, and some even go to say that it's 30 times more powerful at trapping heat in Earth's atmosphere than carbon dioxide. And believe it or not, the biggest source of methane in the world today, when it comes to the humans, is actually animal agriculture. Yeah, mostly the beef industry. Chicken, turkeys, pigs, and cows are collectively the largest producer of methane in the US. Nitrous oxide, that is 300 more times powerful in trapping heat than CO2, is also, as we can see, the 65% of the worldwide nitrous oxide emissions comes from the animal agriculture. So here you can see that 1 calorie from animal protein requires 11 times as much as fossil fuel as 1 calorie of plant protein. And there's one also good statistics that says with 1 kilo, we can, for example, we have some limited resources, we can produce 1 kilo of, so we need like basically 16 times more plants to produce 1 kilo of meat than if we just produce 16 kilos of plants. Now, greenhouse gases are something that is very common in today's climate change talks. But when we take a look at the data, we can see that, of course, energy used in industry is the global one of the global the major producers of greenhouse gases emissions. But we can see that food is responsible for approximately 26 of the global greenhouse gases emissions. And when we take a look at it here, within some part of the energy, there's also that is not accounted in agriculture, for example, aviation, road transportation, and for example, stuff like that. So just not to be confused with this data, it's approximately 26%. And here we can see that the food, non-food is like 74%. And only within food, you can see how much livestock fish farms are basically like intensive when it comes to the greenhouse gases emissions, 31%. Here you can see the crop production and crop as well for animal feed and land use. You can see the land use is huge when it comes to the livestock. It's mostly like land used for human food is much smaller, sorry, than the land that animals are using. When it comes to the greenhouse gases emissions, I would like to say that transportation make up a very small amount of emissions from food, and what you eat is basically far more important than where your food is traveling from. So we often take a look and say local is really important, grass-fed beef, or all those things like might, for example, if you eat locally, it might reduce your impact, but it accounts for like 6%, only like 6%. So it doesn't play a lot. It's more important what you eat. You can see all this like beef, lamb, cheese, pig meat, poultry meat, all those stuffs are requiring much more greenhouse gases emissions than the plants, right? When you take a look at the methane, um, methane is really problematic, right? Uh, for example, when you take a look at the carbon footprint of diets across the European Union, you can see that dairy, meat, and eggs are responsible for 83% of the global greenhouse gases emissions, while other foods are not so much. So here we can see the greenhouse gases emissions. Again, this study is meta-analysis. I would really like everyone for you to take a look. You can go into our world in data and go to the environment and food, and you will see it. And as you can see, a quarter of global emissions comes from the food, as I said, and more than half of the food emissions come from animal products, and half of the farmed animal emissions come from the beef and lamb. So, of course, it would be really great if you could stop eating beef and lamb, but ideally, it would be much better if you could just switch to the plant-based diet. Um, Now, this is really interesting. More greenhouse gases have been emitted from the land use change than from the burning of fossil fuels. And now I know this a lot of people might not be aware of, because we often say that fossil fuels are really problematic, and they are. But there is really interesting uh, uh, data that says that even if we stop fossil fuels immediately, like right now, we would still reach more than 1.5 degrees threshold that was set in a Paris Agreement. So there is no way we can target this without talking about animal agriculture. And of course, as I've been talking about methane, methane's impact is now so great that the Earth will warm by 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius by 2030, whether or not CO2 emissions are reduced. And of course, 2/3 of methane emissions are human caused. And the greatest source, as I said, is being ruminant livestock, cattle, sheep, and goats, followed by the leakage of methane. Of course, like natural gas from oil and gas production, livestock waste, landfill, and coal mining. And this is also one, just sorry, some people actually asked a question, but I'll take a look at it later on. Now, the land usage is also really problematic. And believe it or not, the land usage is actually one of the most problematic here when we talk about food impact. So the land usage is the one that is responsible for a lot of those stuff. Like we need more like water to feed it. We need more greenhouse emissions are coming from it. And meat-centered diet requires 10 to 20 times as much as land as a plant-based diet. And nearly half of the world's grains and soybeans are fed to animals, resulting in a huge waste of food calories and protein. And animal agriculture destroyed the world's agricultural land. The process begins mostly with clear cutting the forests to create the cattle pastures and other ruminants as well, but it's mostly the cattle. And eventually the pastures are plowed under the used to grow animal feed crops. So basically we destroy like rainforests to make food for animals, and of course space for animals to be there. And this is a major loss because trees provide wildlife habitats, and which is, if you can remember, wildlife are going to extinct because why? Because we want cheap meat, eggs, and dairy. And they keep topsoil in place, replenish groundwater, aquifers, absorb a lot of carbon dioxide, and stabilize climates. So there is a lot of damage we might even not be able to calculate, but they're directly caused by animal agriculture. And about half of the world's tropical forests have been cleared. This is really sad. And each year, an estimated 18 millions of acres of forests are lost, which is equally to the size of Panama. And just take a look at that. It was said by UN Food and Agriculture Organization back then, really, really back then. But today it's much worse. And of course, the pasture was the dominant driver of forest area loss, related carbon loss in South America, followed by the commercial cropland. And now what kind of scared me is that animal agriculture is responsible for up to 90% of the Amazon destruction. All these footages that you have seen that Amazon is being cleared is nothing more than for animal agriculture. Don't be confused if people say, yeah, it's because they grow soya, but yeah, those soya, if not all of it, is going to be used for animals. So, as I said, leading causes of the rainforest destructions are livestock and feed crops. Here is the data at the Amazon. You can see this is only within like a few decades from the satellite. It's a huge difference. We're losing so much of Amazon only because animal agriculture. And here is also really interesting data. I mean, humanity destroyed 1/3 of the world's forests by expanding agriculture. It's you can see here like 57% were forests, and only now you see as we grow up, we see how much of those forests we actually lost, and how much we actually converted it to the grazing land, and 50% crop. And here, animal agriculture occupies 46% of the land that was once covered by the forests. And now it's clearly self-explanatory how we are destroying wildlife, right? And in a simple way, I'll just keep to be here a little bit. So Earth's surface, we know it's mostly water, like three of the quarters are water, right? And land surface, yeah, is mostly habitable land. And within habitable land, 50% is agriculture. And I honestly find this really problematic. I don't believe that 50% has to be agriculture. So it can be less. But even if it's a 50%, the more problematic thing is that 70% of this agricultural land is livestock, so meat and dairy. This, of course, yeah, includes grazing land for animals and arable land used for animal feed production. And now what is really problematic here as well is that animal agriculture occupies so much agricultural land, yet it gives only 18% of a calorie supply globally. And when it comes to this famous protein we love to talk about, it gives only 30% that comes from the meat and dairy. And 63% comes from the plant-based. So we see how much, even in this world problematic food systems, we see the data that plants are kind of still just better for us. Biodiversity loss is really problematic. Everyone talks about it, but we often don't see that the cause is animal agriculture, because 10,000 years ago, 99% of the biomass, which is like logical, or the residual mass, was wild animals, because wild animals were like, they were taking the world, right? And today, humans and animals that we raise as food make up 98% of the zoomass. And the Global Living Planet Index continues to decline, and it shows the average 68 decrease in population sizes of mammals, birds, reptiles, and fish between only 1970s and 2016. So this is really problematic. This is really scary as well. When we take a look at the graphics now, we can see how really small. It's really small amount of wild animals being here on a planet. Humans, of course, occupy some biomass, but mostly are livestock and pets. And of course, pets are just a small amount of it, but it's mostly animals that we use to eat ourselves to eat. This is not sustainable at all. You can see back then how much like carbon was, tons of carbons back then. So basically 1 ton of carbon is equal to this like 100 people, and you can see the statistics. But the point is that today humans, of course, increased in population, which is expected, of course. But livestock, again, this is a problem that we produce by ourselves. We produce so many animals to eat. So most of those animals are the ones we basically and literally, quite literally, produce to eat, because they don't end up to live like we do. They just end up very shortly to be commodities for food, like meat, dairy, and eggs. And only a small amount of the wildland mammals. Some of those animals, like rhinos, some specific kind of rhinos, are gone extinct forever, because what happens when you destroy their planet, destroy their habitat, of course, they're gonna die. And this is also very problematic issues that not a lot of people are talking about. I mean, we have seen some articles about it, that antibiotic resistance is really problematic, but I can see some people being aware that over 75% of antibiotics produced around the world are now being given to livestock. And that kind of makes sense, because when we put all those animals quite together, right? It's quite impossible not to use antibiotics, because they will produce so many diseases, right? It's pretty much like you make a ticking bomb for diseases. And believe it or not, most of those zoonoses, like we had the COVID-19, bird flu, swine flu, mad cow disease, pretty much all of it comes from animals, the way we actually were treating and still are treating animals. So you can see that animal agriculture impact us both in so many ways, right? So basically, in summary, I think I was a little bit fast, but then you'll have more more to ask. In summary, we can see that greenhouse gases are problematic, and quite a lot comes from the food. And when it comes to the land use, 50% is agriculture. And when it comes to the freshwater use, 70% of global freshwater withdrawals is using by agriculture, and most of it is used by animal agriculture, as we said. Eutrophication, so 78% of global ocean and freshwater pollution. For example, now it's pretty impossible to eat any kind of fish without having microplastic. And we know this microplastics explained comes from the very same animal agriculture. And biodiversity. Biodiversity is maybe even the scariest, because we literally lost a lot of not only animals, but as well as plants that used to actually be part of our ecosystem. And the nature climate change, they said that a likelihood of global food system collapse is increasing. So I think by now it's pretty self-explanatory that that this food systems is not really sustainable. And now, what I would also like to share with you guys is that what we can do about this. Now, why is this problem such a huge? Why nobody's like trying to fix it? I mean, there are of course people trying to solve it, but the problem is much deeper. We have to tackle something pretty much from the top to the beginning, but as well from the beginning to the top. So I believe each one of us has this power of individual change. We can change. Every change comes from the individual, right? But when you take a look at this graph, so this is basically how much subsidies in US are given to the fruit and vegetable farming, and it's $20 million. That's not a lot when you compare 38 billions of dollars that are given to meat and dairy farming. And European Union actually gives something similar like this. So we find that subsidies are pretty problematic the way they are used today. Of course, there has been some progress here. For example, in the European Union, they recently banned, actually stopped giving millions of dollars to animal agriculture advertisements that were used to be there. Unfortunately, in US, that's still happening. You have literally the states that are giving so USDA that are giving a lot of money to McDonald's and other meat companies for advertisements. And unfortunately, what sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's not. They also have ag laws. So basically, the laws that are protecting animal agriculture, and I can give you some of the links for the pretty awesome documentaries to take a look at. So people who were searching about all those stuff, and they came across the conclusions that those meat industries have extremely powerful lobbies that are literally making the laws for themselves, so the companies can be like more relaxed when it comes to the environmental policies, and so on and so on. And the most recent in-depth study into environmental impact of what we eat was a peer-reviewed journal by international team of researchers at Oxford University and Journal of Nature. And what was actually said there is that in order to have any chance to keep temperatures below the dangerous 2 degrees threshold set out in the Paris Agreement, in high-income countries, we need to drastically reduce our consumption of meat and dairy by around 80%. So only to keep this threshold, right? So I think it's also explanatory that we should kind of just stop. So what we can do, most of us live in cities which cover about only 1% of the land used by humanity, and we see human impact there, but by far our greatest impact on planet Earth is rarely seen. 2/3 of the land we use is for food production. So I used to believe that like those buildings, like it's better to live in a village or something like that for the environment, but it might be better for ourselves. But living in buildings, for example, is there's a really big efficiency for heat, because when you heat, there's a lot of people living there, and you have this heat efficiency, and sometimes counterintuitively, but some stuff that we used to talk about back then, like how plastic straws are problematic, or like plastic packaging might be problematic, but in fact that might be actually good in some cases for environment. So yeah, there's actually a lot of greenwashing today, because those animal industries, they don't want to be seen as a problem, but they are the problem. And I'm afraid we can no longer just not take a look at it. And 85% of this land is used for livestock, so grazing lands and the feed crops, basically those two things. And changing how we use this 85% is a key to reversing environmental crisis we face. So just a few more data. Please keep bear with me. I think we have 15 more minutes. A study of United States land use found that 100% plant-based diet with the same energy, protein, and nutrient yield reduces land required by 88%. And globally, the same diet could reduce human inhabited land use by 76%. And I would just also like to mention some really interesting fact. For example, the chicken have like a 40 times climate-related warming per calorie of protein, and uses 50 times more water per calorie of protein than, for example, chickpeas. So you can see, and this is also from this Springman, that is the biggest environmental study. So I think it's quite interesting, because it's not only about the environment, but it's also about the protein, the calorie, the resource efficiency, and who would say so much things that actually are. There's actually just one answer we can make, and it's only just to change our diet. So really, really powerful tool that we individuals have. So of course we have to talk with corporations and have the policies and all that, but everything actually comes down to us, to ourselves. We consumers have power, because we consumers vote with our money, and we dictate what the industry is going to produce and do. For example, the KFC, pretty much known, one of the most popular meat industries, they actually quite recently started having a lot of vegan products, like vegan nuggets, vegan chicken, and all that, because they see the demand for it. So they listen to the consumers. They only care about profit. And in the recent study, yeah, there was also so we can see at every meal we can choose this or that. And in this study that was, let me just write here. So so I have oh sorry, it was to the Yoti. I will send this actually to everyone. Take a look at this study. You'll be amazed how the study is literally the meta-analysis. So much data out there, and it's really like the biggest we have today. And I think we really have to use it. And there, it's pretty easy to conclude that even the most eco-friendly animal-based diet is still has much higher environmental impact on our planet than the least eco-friendly plant-based diet. So yeah, we have to change diet and of course take a look at other factors like being organic and local if possible and all that. So what we can do, and UN Environmental Program report in 2010 found that reducing environmental impact would only be possible with sustainable global diet change away from animal products. So more than 10 years ago. And according to the UN IPCC, the most comprehensive environmental meta-analysis, the single best thing we can do to help the planet is to go vegan. This is also according to the Oxford studies. And now I will, yeah, we have 50 more minutes. I thought I'll be kind of late with this, so I will let you guys have a questions now. I'm sorry if I was too fast. I was really afraid I'm not gonna make it within 45 minutes, including the Q&A. But yeah, have a questions. I'll try to answer as much as possible. So anonymous attendee asked the question. So what we can do? I think, yeah, you can see at this slide what we can do. We can do a lot of stuff, but I think the most powerful thing is to change our diet. The answer, what is a carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide is basically a greenhouse gas that that is being produced within different activities of humans. And carbon dioxide should I'm not saying it shouldn't exist there. It's not possible not to exist. It should be there, but to some really low to normal level to keep our planet warm. But there's so much of carbon dioxide today being produced by heavily industries like animal agriculture industries that are keeping a lot of heat, and it's causing the global warming. So carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas emission. Are you? Another question was, are you undertaking a vegan-based diet yourself? It's personally hard to find a way to undertake such a diet in my country. Yeah, I have been vegan basically since 2018. Yeah, quite interesting since this study was published. But the study wasn't a reason why I became vegan. I became vegan because of the documentary called Dominion. So my choice was basically I became vegan because of the ethics, but I didn't know any of those stuffs prior to becoming vegan. But I swear, if I knew only those environmental stuffs, I would become vegan immediately. And yeah, I know it might be hard initially, but it's hard because we are used to the animal-based diet, because those industries, my colleague Ildana explained in a presentation before. It's live, it's a 20-minute recorded presentation. You can see how those industries actually quite successfully manage to brainwash us that we have to eat animals. And yeah, so we have to do a little kind of like rewiring our brain. And it might be a little hard at start, but trust me, it's really easy when you take a look at the benefits you will get. And also the planet will get the benefits as well. So someone asked, what is the chord? I assume this is the code at the end. I will actually the last slide I have after this, there will be a code. So I will go after that after Q&A session. What will be done to maintain the availability of clean water in nature? I'm not sure I understand the question perfectly. Well, like I think only around 1% or 3% of water available is drinkable fresh water we have today, but less and less this water is available. So yeah, I think we won't really be able to solve water issues if we keep eating animals, and I think that's pretty like as direct as truthful. So yeah, I think we have to just change the way our food systems are existing today in order to have a clean water. So what is so the question, sorry, what is Laberton et al? Laberton et al is basically the name of the study. So yeah, it's basically the name of the study. I can send you if you want it. Why rice milk uses so much resources? So yeah, rice milk, I'm not sure why does it uses a lot of resources. I think it's mostly because of the so a lot of those stuff, including those both plant-based diet and animal-based diet, when we talk about the processes, it's really not much about the processes. For example, transportation, you have seen how transportation is really small amount, only like 6% of greenhouse gases within the whole process. So manufacturing, processing, packaging is not really a big thing. Of course, we have to work on it to be better, but it's mostly within the production system. And why rice milk uses so much resources, I'm not sure does it uses so much resources. It uses less water, definitely, than almond milk. But yeah, I think those practices can be better, of course, but still, it depends on the what kind of food you're talking about. Almond just definitely requires more water, while, for example, rice might require more land or and so on. What can people who can't afford to change their diet to do reduce environmental impact aside from going plant-based? So this is a really good question. Yeah, we have 8 more minutes. Well, I think, in my honest opinion, there's really small amount of people in the world who can't really change their diet, like people living in Antarctica or something like that. But we have to understand that one of the cheapest food on the planet are actually plants, and meat is actually really expensive. And we should think about it. Once you go dive deeper into this, you will see how cheap vegan food and vegan lifestyle can be. And I live in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is one of the poorest countries in Europe, and GDP is extremely low here. And back then we had barely any vegan options, but now we have a little bit more vegan options. And you will see, you'll go to the countries like Sweden, Netherlands, the countries that have a lot of vegan options, and you will, like, most of the people out there are not vegans, and they will say, oh, but it's hard for me, there's a lot of options. But there is. So it's always about in our head, like, is it actually hard, to change our diet? So I think when we take a look at the what does food-based diet does to our planet, us, I think it's definitely um, affordable to change it, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, but in a case you can't, of course, it's better to just like reduce beef and go to the like poultry. And but then again, that's not really the correct solution. Uh, does does the world get more carbon every second because like we breathe out air? Yeah, we breathe out air, but again, we also take some air. So yeah, we produce a lot of carbon, but mostly because of the industries. And we have 6 more minutes. So how much time remain in this meeting? We have 6 more minutes. And what is a reflection of this area? The carbon, I'm not sure what was the question. What is the chord? So the code, please. So I'm not sure. Shall I actually share the last slide with you? Okay, someone. Yes, we can wrap up. Okay. So just someone ask one more question, and I think we can. Okay. So 2 questions I'll try to answer, and we can wrap it up. What is the difference between a vegan, vegetarian, and plant-based diet? So vegan and plant-based diet is pretty much the same, but some people love to say that plant-based diet includes honey, but it doesn't. Vegan and vegetarians are the people who only like do not consume meat and that's it, while people who are vegans do not consume any animal products. Yeah. How do we? Okay, when you're going to camping, what will be a good? Well, when it comes to the camping, there's a lot of vegan food we can eat, like fruit, seeds, nuts, fruits, veggies, and so much. There's a lot of options and menus today. So okay, I'm gonna wrap this up. Thank you everyone who joined today. Thank you so much for your time. I hope it was interesting, and I'm really sorry if I was a little bit fast. It was hard to include all of this in such a short time, but feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions on those mails. This is my mail, and this is the mail of my organization, and this is a session code PLTIB. So thanks again, everyone, and thank you to Yota Yoti for inviting me to have this really really important talk.